Welcome to the Fowl Front podcast.
Welcome to the Fowl Front Weekly After Action Review.
You never eat anything that looks terrifying. Got it. All right, welcome back to the Fowl Front Waterfowl Podcast Review. Hey, I got some feedback from y'all on the public land episode that we did this week, and I appreciate what everyone has to say. I really do, and I'm thankful that it was helpful for some of you, and I'm glad some people disagree. I'm being really honest here when I tell you that I got a very mad review or two about the episode touting us as elitists, and that I don't make the rules on public land. I might not make the rules up. I might not be the moral center line or the guy that gets to draw that line in the sand. So, say what you want. Just try to be respectful of each other and other people and public lands, and I don't think that that's anything to get upset over, and we really all are on the same team. So, golden rule. We've had some crazy weather this last couple weeks. Oh, by the way, I apologize. You're probably going to hear all sorts of background noise and stuff. I am not in, I would say studio, but I don't have a studio. I have my quiet kind of basement, but I am not in studio. I'm sitting out on my parents' back porch up in Nebraska. My sister's doing something across the table. There's like 50 dogs that live on this lake, and apparently a guy that wants to be working on his deck at like 6 a.m. So all those things will make for a perfectly ambient podcast episode. Anyways, shall we get into the countdown? This week, this countdown is brought to you by Rivers West. If you want a 30% discount, head on over to thefowlfront.com and get yourself a new jacket or bibs from Rivers West this season. All right, you're probably looking for the news and tips segment. I got nothing. I am just super excited. The dove season's about 2 weeks away. Shortly there, followed by teal season. So maybe we'll throw some migration reports on here once the season gets started, but we'll see. All right. Oh my gosh. A merganser just flew up onto the beach. That was completely staged. But right before I started hitting the record button, a merganser flew up onto my parents' beach. It was quite strange. Sydney, what do you think of mergansers?
I think they look like snakes when they swim.
She said they think, this is my sister, she said she thinks they look like snakes when they're swimming and that they're terrifying. Are they very good eating?
Apparently not.
No. What kind of duck is that swimming out there right now? It is. It is a mallard hen. Good job, Sydney. All right. Some honorable mentions for this week's podcast countdown. We got the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, episode 147 with the pre-season checklist. We got the Tom Rowland Podcast, Cal's Week in Review, Powder Hooks on Gravel Podcast, the MVM Show with Titus from Mid-Valley Mercenaries, the Duck Gun Podcast with Elliot and Jordan. We got Jake Latondras' Outdoor Cameraman Experience, and then we got Jake Terry's Endless Migration with a pretty cool one from a world-renowned taxidermist. All right, number 6, we've got the new podcast, the Average Opportunity Podcast by Lance Million. Kind of like Million. Hope I said that right. So this one just sprung up and has a couple episodes out. One with Jeff Stanfield and then one with Garrett Trentham, both dudes I like a lot. Garrett's with Delta Waterfowl, and actually you'll be hearing him either Monday or next Monday on my podcast. Good production quality, and so far, so good. I haven't listened to the one with Garrett yet, but the one with Jeff Stanfield from the Big Honker Podcast and Stanfield Hunting gives a good look behind the Big Honker and explains what Lance is trying to do with his show. So, cool. All right, coming in at number 5, we got the Meat Eater Podcast titled Bibles and Bowls. You're not going to be interested in this one if you're not into elk hunting, which is interesting because I was interested by it, and I'm not into elk hunting, which I guess Maybe you will be. I don't know. It really gives a great look into the calling and the calls of elk hunting and has some really entertaining rapport. Yeah, all in all, not too bad. Keep your finger on the dial button, though, because there's a lot of elk bugling that goes on. But it really is interesting. And if you've never been elk hunting, they do a great job of motivating you to want to go elk hunting. So I'll say that. Okay, next we've got number 4. I said I was going to check them out last week, and I'm going to eat some leather from my own shoe here. I kind of have not liked this podcast. Maybe it was because it was back in the day when they first started off or something. I don't know. I just had an initial bad read on this podcast. Went back, checked it out, and I'm eating a piece of humble pie. And number 4, we've got Dr. Duck, Season 2, Episode 1, where Dr. Duck, Dennis, and the fowl hunter, Billy, sit down and talk to... I feel funny saying this. Aaron Jones and Chandler Smith from Rogers Sporting Goods at the Rogers Duck Day. And then they talk about the current generation of waterfowl hunters, why you ought to treat the next guy to you in the marsh like you treat your neighbor. And I know that I have... in our group, kind of asked people why they like these podcasts, and I guess I kind of figured it out. They're not too bad at guys, I would suppose. No, which takes me back. None of us, I don't think any of us are. I think people get really, really into what podcasts they like, and which is good. Like, go be a fan of what you're going to be a fan of, but don't pee in the pool. You know what I'm saying? You got 5-6 people out here that are actually trying to bring you content, responsible content, and entertaining content to raise the rhetoric, hopefully, for waterfowl hunting and hunting as general. And guess what? We're all on the same freaking team. We're all on the same team. So, all right. Dr. Duck, Season 2, Episode 1, Rogers Sporting Goods. All right, coming in at number 3, we got the Big Honker Podcast with the first migration report of the season coming out of North Dakota. Take a listen to this quick 20-minute episode for a bit of a different feel with the Big Honker Podcast, and stay up to date with the early goose season up in North Dakota. I'm really excited to see where the migration reports on the Big Honker Podcast lead us this year. I know that's something that I think is just really cool. Talking to everybody all along the flyway. I know I'm going to get in on the action by doing some of the similar or the same and doing some weather stuff with a buddy of mine who's a local meteorologist. And I'm just really excited to hear the stories this year. I think everybody's really nervous with all the water where I'm from and how it's going to change their hunting styles this year. And I think it might be good for everybody. Kind of get a fresh look at how they're going to do things out of the norm. But sounds like we had a pretty good hatch. It sounds like duck and goose numbers are just fine this year. And remember, we are in the good old days. So if you want to continue to stay in the good old days, go give a donation to Ducks Unlimited, Delta Waterfowl, the conservation group of your choice. Right, wrong, disagree. If you're a hardcore Delta guy or you're a hardcore DU guy, sure, go ahead. Just donate to that one. But you better double down, buddy. Because if you go out and you spend all this money on shells, on guns, on waders, on everything that you want to go out and enjoy this natural resource that's all of ours, you want to go out into the world and make sure you go give back. So, and if you're hearing all these duck noises in the background, those aren't staged, are they, Sydney?
Those are in fact real ducks.
Those are real ducks, which kind of adds a nice little... I'm glad the guy stopped working on his deck for a minute. This is really... I should probably wrap this up until he starts up again. Okay. Where were we? I already did that one. Number 3, Big Honker Podcast, first migration report of the season. Okay. Down to the last 2 here. We got number 2, Remy Warren's Cutting the Distance Podcast by Meat Eater, episode number 2, which is all about bear attacks and being safe in bear country. And not only does he tell you some cool stories, like how one of his buddies on the not most recent Meat Eater shoot, on a Meat Eater shoot, rode a bear's back down a mountain. And while that might sound like a tall tale, it perhaps is very true, because I've heard it 3 different times from Steve and from some of the other guys that were there. And basically how to keep yourself safe in bear country, which I don't know if many of us waterfowl hunters find ourselves in the same place as bears too often in the pursuit of waterfowl. And in fact, if you do have to deal with bears while you're waterfowl hunting, you should call me, because I want to have you on the podcast. So yeah, anyways, it's about 25 minutes long, and it's really entertaining and informative, and I think it's really lending itself nicely, yes, to the hunting narrative. All right, at number 1, you guys think it's going to be the Hunting Collective, don't you? Or you think it's going to be the Fowl Front? Well, it is the Fowl. I'm just kidding. It's not the Fowl Front. I can't do that. All right, at number 1, we've got the Orvis Hunting and Shooting Podcast coming out of nowhere with an episode titled All You Ever Needed to Know About Shotgun Shells with Mike Stack and Ben Frank of Winchester Ammo, where they discuss a shotgun shell in more depth than any explanation I've thus heard. And it's extremely cool to hear all the different factors that we normally don't think about other than shot size and powder and shell length. The episode has so inspired me that I called Brandon up from Boss, and I think we're going to prepare an informative talk, getting after all the details and factors behind every portion of the shell, which has me super excited, as I'm a big fan of the explosive trains, as it has affected my daily job for the last 7 years, and there's a lot of things that I didn't even realize translated into shotgun shells. But yeah, anyways, sorry. Kind of a quick hitting one, guys. It was a really busy week, and I'm here in Nebraska, so I'm going to go enjoy some time with the family, and I hope you enjoyed this Saturday episode of the Fowl Front. As always, please send me a review of your own. If you want to audio record it, I'll even throw it on here. You send me a review of any podcast you listen to, and I'll throw it on here, except for you, Dan Reese. I don't want to hear nothing about a podcast. Dan Reese got me. I asked him for some podcast suggestions, and he sent me over to a podcast called Call Her Daddy. And I definitely just clicked on it. My daughter was in the truck, and after about the first 10 seconds, I realized what it was, and he got me. So thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. None. Oh, yeah. As Jeff Stanfield's dad would say, as old Ron Stanfield would say, it's a sorry dog that don't wag his own tail. And this week on the Fowl Front, we talked about public land, and I sat down with some buddies, one being Ian Burrow and then another listener, and we talked about public land, like I already talked about in this episode already, I guess. We talked about public land etiquette and what to do, and so did the MVM show, actually. So if you're a new hunter and you want to not be an ass in the marsh this year, go listen to those 2 episodes, and then probably a couple more, and kind of get a little lowdown on it. So, all right, guys, have a good rest of your weekend, and I'll see you on Monday for an episode. I haven't decided which one I'm going to release yet, I won't lie. But, all right, I'll see you then.